Oh, yeah.
So you're welcome to help yourself to a box lunch. I feel like we're all adults here if you want to eat. That's fine. Or you can wait until after that as well. I think that'll be enough for everyone. Yes. And then we'll go ahead and get started, I think. So can I get the panelists to come down? And we are streaming to YouTube. So keep that in mind. And I'm actually
No. I just
All right, so we'll give folks a couple minutes to get settled and get started. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Thanks everybody for coming. The City Forum, it's our bi-weekly seminar series in the Canadian Regional Planning Program. Talk with academics and professional planners about their work. Today, we are lucky to have a great panel we've assembled for the CRP Career Day. I've got some questions that I'm going to ask the panel about their career trajectory and advice that they have for current students. And I'm going to try to leave some time for questions from the audience at the end. To start, I think we're just going to go ahead and do some self-introductions. So I'll ask all the panelists to tell us about when you graduated, where you're working now, and what you do in your current position. And we'll start with Sean and then move down.
Thank you for having me here today. It's good to see you all. So I graduated in 2010, so 12 years ago, quite a while ago. I currently work at the Texas General Land Office, Community Development and Revitalization Division, which is just down the road here. It's a couple blocks away next to the Bob Willis Museum. And I'm currently the manager of the Policy Development Team. And we work with CDBG Disaster Recovery and CDBG Mitigation Funds for the state of Texas.
Yeah, it's great to be here. My name is Sophia Benner, and I graduated in 2013. And I am currently at the City of Austin in the Transportation Department, the Active Transportation Division, which is like the bike program. And I've kind of created my work, and it's shifted a lot. My position was new thanks to the 2016 bond funding. And so right now, what I'm kind of carving out is a bike parking program and other more programmatic or kind of human infrastructure oriented work as the team focuses mostly on bikeway design and implementation.
I am Beth Rosenbarger. I graduated in 2012. Stater up here. I work in Indiana, in Bloomington, Indiana. It's a college town. And my title isn't helpful, planning services manager, which is long range and transportation planning. And I, in pitches for presentations to non-planners, I say I'm like a life coach for the city, where I try to hold the city accountable to goals that it set for 85,000 people, which is really hard to do, especially from like inside the city. So try to track our comprehensive plan and also work on transportation projects. My favorite work is street design, and I work with a lot of our engineers on that too.
Hi, I'm Jess King. I work for a small startup here in Austin, and we build. So I work with a private developer. I've always worked in the private land development sector. We build small scale developments all over the state of Texas, and primarily small cottage communities, sometimes considered workforce housing, depending on the city that we go into. And I focus mostly, I'm a development manager, and that's what I've primarily been in most of my career. And what I typically do is everything from due diligence, from land acquisition, all the way through the entitlements with the city, and then get it through engineering with the civil, and then through permits with the city, design and build out through construction. So, and I graduated in 2012.
Thanks so much. So I'm going to try to popcorn around a little bit, so we're not always running the same order. So the next question is about your career path. So I want to ask the panelists each to reflect on the path that you've taken to get who you are. And the students, I think, are interested to know whether you had kind of strategically planned that path or whether it took unexpected twists and turns. And I'll ask Sophia to go first.
Okay. Yeah, it's a good question. I remember being a student, and I worked in the digital fabrication lab as like my, well, it wasn't like a GRA, but like a GRA position. And I felt like it was, at that time, I think it was harder to find a job then. I hear it's better now. But at that time, hopefully. No, it's like a thing, like at the city of Austin, apparently we're having retention issues because you can get more money elsewhere. But so I was pretty strategic in the sense that I wrote my thesis over the summer while still working in the lab. So I was able to like afford that and kind of buy some time to do. I really wanted to find a job like organically. I was kind of intimidated by just like applying, just sending off applications. And I actually, it worked out. I volunteered with this firm that had just gotten a contract to write the urban trails plan for the city of Austin. And I volunteered to like hand out flyers. And I should say also, when I was a student, I interned for the bike program, and that person was the client of this firm that I'm like handing out flyers, and then I applied. They're like, oh, we have this open position. I applied for it and I got it. And I've been in like the bike world ever since. And I also like hopped on the Bicycle Advisory Council, and I was the chair of the Bicycle Advisory Council. And I think like all of that helped me get not necessarily my second job, which was at GrantWorks, but definitely, my current job. And so
Sounds like it wasn't super strategic. There were like kind of chance encounters.
Okay, yeah.
No judgments. Can we go with Jess next?
Yeah, sure. I would say when I came to CRP, I had worked a few years before in DC. My first degree, my undergrad, was in historic preservation. And so I came into CRP really wanting to do private development, but on the building side of it, I wanted to be do restorations of buildings. And so that was my plan, was to go into building restoration. And, I had this idea of what that would be, go into some big city and restore the buildings, stuff that I was seeing in DC. But once I graduated, I realized, those jobs are a dime a dozen. And even though I had a great skill set, it was just super hard to find those jobs. So what I ended up doing was going into land development. And it wasn't what I exactly wanted to do, but I had great skills for it. So I did that for some time, learned amazing things, worked with amazing people, worked with an amazing company for more than several years. And the experience I learned from that was invaluable, right? And sometimes you do things that you don't always agree with all the time, but in doing those things and being exposed to people that you don't always share all the same values with, you can teach them great things, about our discipline. And that is, I think, the best thing that I learned over all the years in what I would say more corporate world, was teaching people great planning skills in one of the most important areas, which is large scale planning development, where I think the people need it the most. These large master plans that are happening, which is what I did for such a long time. So yeah, my journey took a lot of turns, and then I ended up consulting for a little bit, which I never would have thought I would do. It's consult, and that landed me where I am now. And I'm very happy, excited to be where I am now. I'm doing finally small scale development, something that's more workforce, affordable. It's what I always wanted to do. It's what I focused a little bit more on in my thesis. So it kind of all comes full circle, and it comes that way, I think, when it's supposed to come that way, when everything is supposed to happen. It sounds cliche, but I think, that is when things are supposed to land. So.
Can you elaborate a bit on the skills that you mentioned, the skills you thought were important or that you were able to teach your colleagues?
From CRP, or just in general?
Just in general.
Yeah, sure. And this kind of touches on some other questions I think you have, so we can hone in on those if you want. So I think that, sometimes we enter a room, whether it's the boardroom, the neighborhood meeting, or it doesn't matter what the room is, and we are going to be experts on the planning, the planning principles, right? And whatever it is we're trying to advocate for, with bike lanes or something, we're trying to advocate for that because we believe in it. And I guess it's sometimes you just have to celebrate the small wins. At my old company, I had to take glory in educating people on bees, the importance of bees, because that was it for a while. That was all I had, saving the bees in a community. And it was all I could grasp to. That was any element of planning in what I was working on. Everything else I was working on had, in my mind, nothing to do with planning and what I had really learned in school. What I was really doing was mostly project management. And so I would try to find things that really made me feel valued, like fees or bike lanes or whatever. And so I walk into a room and teach people about this is important and this is why. And the other people in the room had they weren't aware of any of that or why it was important. And so you just have to celebrate small stuff sometimes. And that's it.
Sean, next question.
Yeah, so I've been working for many years. I started out doing economic revitalization work with the state in about 2005, working on base realignment and closure in Texas. And then at that time, I was really introduced and was unsure of what my career would look like. And so I started thinking about these longer term 5-year, 10-year goals or plans. with regards to, what it is that I want to do, what kind of field I wanted to work in, where I wanted to work as well, whether that was on the East Coast or staying in Austin. I did choose to go to the East Coast and to New York City to do some work on economic revitalization for the Western Hemisphere. That was a pretty fun gig. And then I stumbled across planning as a field. And so then I looked at that as an opportunity to bring economic revitalization as well as some other more technical skills and soft skills, and started applying for programs. And so I came to this program. And it was a great program for all the things that they have to offer. And coming out of grad school, I did have a very strong, I guess you could say, strategy or trajectory I was hoping to go down. And that actually fell through. In my last month of grad school, the job was no longer available, and I had to really pivot and shift. And I was taken for a loop for a few months. And it really was, not a difficult time, but a kind of existential crisis with, oh my, this is the job that I've always wanted. It was in the field that I wanted to be in. And now I have to really pivot and shift and look at something different, or in the same vein, but not exactly the same agency I wanted to work for. And so, and looking at the 5-year and 10-year goal, I kind of kept within that range of what I wanted to do, and allowed space for those turns and those twists that you might get as you're looking at jobs or looking at opportunities, or challenges come up too. And so I guess you could say it's a hybrid mix of having a larger strategic goal and effort, intermingled with a little bit of short-term 1-year, 6-month goals. Certain things you might want to educate yourself on with regards in this program and other educational opportunities. There's a lot of great certifications that I looked at. One of them was Project Management Professional, PMP certification. That was another kind of tangential sort of approach to my work that I wanted to bring in. Also, AICP, of course, is one of the key certifications for this field. I did not have AICP, one thing I'm still looking at. But yeah, so a hybrid mix, strategic and allowing room and space for some shifts and turns in your career.
So before I came to grad school, I worked in a bakery for 2.5 years. And it seems unrelated, but I would say, that's the time I decided I wanted to become an urban planner. And from also how we make things linear later, that at the time I felt just really unsure and directionless, and was like, I can't believe I'm working in a bakery for so long, all my friends are doing things, blah, blah, blah. And now in hindsight, it was amazing and really excellent. And from talking to people, because turns out I talk to people a lot, and especially in a bakery where you're doing that, ended up getting an internship in the town, which was Bloomington, Indiana, where I was living, and got to have an internship with the county government before coming to grad school. And that it was helpful and interesting. And then I would say I really didn't know what I wanted to do leaving grad school. And some advice my sister gave me was to think about how I felt when I read a job description. And that was really helpful because when I was leaving or when I was graduating, I applied to a job with a transportation planning firm here in the private sector, and then applied to this job in the county where I had interned in Monroe County. And the transportation planning firm, I was just really not excited about it. I was like, I can do this job and I can get experience. It was very in the suburban area of Austin. I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to bike there. I just thought about my day-to-day life, and I was like, this is going to be really hard for me to live the values I care about living and have this job. And I applied to this job in Monroe County that paid 2/3 what that job paid. I'll just say at the time it was $32,000, and it's incredible. It required a master's degree. And I read the job description and was so excited, and had applied and got that job, and was like, I'm moving back to Bloomington. And also everyone I was friends with in grad school was like, it is not surprising that you moved back to Bloomington. So I talked about it all the time, but I was pretty surprised by it. And but I would say from that time, I don't think I've been strategic. I I try to think about, I guess like doing a good job in my job and also what I'm getting out of it, like what skills are happening here? Am I interested in the work I'm doing? And why or why not am I interested in it? So like with the county, I would say, well, two things. I definitely think about the size of the community, like as a planner, being like the size of a company, where when you're in a smaller place, you just do a lot more. So there's not, like I did, so I think that was great experience where I did subdivisions, you do commercial property, residential property, site plans, rezones, the staff works on the comp plan, works on the zoning code, all the stuff, just because it's small and that's what you're doing. And I valued that a lot and wanted to stay generalist for a while. Some people don't want to do that. Sometimes I thought what I was doing was pointless and just didn't enjoy it, but it is kind of like Jess was saying, you're just like, I'm gaining lots of experience and you just learn where you can push and where it is, you can still push, but it might not be the next increment you can achieve at that time. So thinking about what does our code say, and if our code doesn't require this, we can't be pushing for it, but we can take note of, are we getting the results we want from our code? And if we're not, like, let's make note of that and update our code. But just learning those things and learning what that looks like from a code to what people actually build and are allowed to build. And then I moved on, I got a job with the city government in the same county, and I'm kind of just followed the same thing. I've switched jobs within the same department, but I'm just trying to think about, like, what am I interested in doing here? Am I a good fit for this position? And like, what do I want my day-to-day to look like? And what is most exciting to me?
Yeah, like what you said about kind of thinking about if the job description excites you, are you doing something that you enjoy, and continuing to kind of pursue that. I think that was reflected in my own career path as well, which is just kind of on this academic track. I enjoyed doing it, kept doing it, and different opportunities kind of presented themselves to me, and if we were to take advantage of that. So the next question is about what you found most fulfilling or rewarding so far in your career, and also what have been challenges or frustrations that you've had working in the field. So you can tackle one or both of those. We'll start with Jess.
Okay.
You be honest here.
Yeah. So I think, I'll be kind of general with the fulfilling. I think the most fulfilling thing in my career I've found at this point is just mentoring other people, getting people to a point where they're advancing in their career. It becomes less about you and more about the other people around you. And then also, to the point I made earlier, it's about the small wins. It's really hard to get to it's really hard sometimes to get your project when you have a project that's maybe a 20-year legacy project or a 4-year project over the hump. Those are huge projects. So the small wins, when you have someone that doesn't understand anything about planning, and you're just getting them to understand just the smallest concept, and those to me are very fulfilling moments. So that's fulfilling to me in my career. Because in what I do, because I'm in the private sector, I usually am not around people that understand this world, right? So it's very different from the world that they're in. So I'm a little bit of an outlier there. Frustrations, I would say, go with that. I am often seen as the evil developer. And so I have found that very frustrating in my career. It can be very isolating. I find myself, I like to say, a tweener. Like, I feel isolated in the development world because I'm looked at as this crazy liberal. And then in the professional circles of developers. And then if I try to step into the planning world, I'm looked at as an evil developer. So it's difficult. It's very frustrating. And, tried to navigate that as a professional, right? And I would say that my ask would be that more people go into the private development sector, because that's absolutely needed. And this, I mean, it would be a great solution for the built environment. I think it's a big need in what I do. I see it every day. I see the need for cross collaboration when I'm talking to the city, when I'm talking to engineers, all sorts of things. So, yeah.
Sean.
Yes, so one of the great things about working in the professional world have been getting to work with other people who have different skill sets and different approaches to work and different values at times. And being able to kind of meld the minds in a way when it comes to figuring out solutions to particular problems, particular policies, etc. And so getting to work with people in that setting has been great. It's been really fun to work with other planners, other non-planners as well, and people in the finance field, etc. And really kind of bring to the table different approaches and conversations that can reach a solution to a lot of these different, in my field, disaster recovery and mitigation problems. And then there's also that frustration there with regards to working with state government. There is a strong bureaucracy there. And there's a lot of kind of slow moving projects you might want to see come to fruition more quickly. But being that I've been at the state now doing this particular job for 8 years, certain things are starting to crop up that are kind of really cool. In our internship program, which there's a couple interns here today who are getting the chance to be part of that program. We're getting a lot of great insight and new ideas from the interns. That's another kind of program that we were able to develop in our division. And also a GIS program. That's another thing too that is really up and coming, not even up and coming so much as it is a force to kind of reckon with when it comes to data visualization and GIS. And that's been really fun, a really good experience over the past several years, seeing that come into the forefront with my work and what we're doing. And the frustrations again can be that bureaucratic process that you do need to pay attention to. It is an important component of private sector and nonprofit and public sector work. But there are ways, as long as you keep kind of moving forward and you kind of construct to work within those politics and also work within that bureaucracy, there's a lot of good things that can come from that. So don't get frustrated once you're in the working world, which many of you are currently in the working and have been. But just knowing that it does take strategic maneuverability and strategic discussions, etc. But in my field, one thing that's been great working in disaster recovery is helping people who've been impacted by disasters get back into their homes or help communities build back their culverts and their bridges, etc. And so that is one thing that's always kind of a bright light in my day when things do get frustrating.
Something that's really rewarding is, especially for me in my transportation side, seeing a project get built. It's amazing. I love that you just get to see an actual change in the built environment. And I think that's, to me, incredibly rewarding. I can move on from that too fast is the problem I realized. I'm like, okay, great, next thing. And it's hard to remember, like, one of the challenges, it takes years. Almost everything takes years. And like we just built in Bloomington, I guess our first two-way protected bike lane. It's amazing. And I think it took, I don't know if that was at least 5 years or something from the time I started like pitching the idea. And that's pretty fast because there are also so many that won't happen. But I would say things getting built is incredibly rewarding. I'll add another one of like working with people who are really great and care about what they do, because I have learned in my job that being part of a team where people are engaged in what they're doing and excited about what they're doing is really important to me. And then challenging frustrations. There are so many, so that's hard. I'm in a burnt out phase, so we can talk about that later, but like, I think that I work in a, maybe surprisingly, since it's Indiana, I think, Bloomington's smaller, it has similarities to Austin in that we don't have trouble saying the goals, and we don't have trouble saying what we want to be, and like on paper, oh my gosh, we want to do everything. And then as soon as everything is about change, because like we're not making goals based on being the same, we're making goals about doing something differently. And I think that is incredibly, it's just very frustrating, and how to frame that and work on it. And that like everybody in our town says they love walking, bicycling, and transit. And if you are removing parking on a street to improve one of those, then well, not that way. Like that's not what we meant. We only meant like by adding extra space. Like don't make driving harder, don't change parking on my street, don't change my life, and that's what it is, like time and time again. That is, I think, the essence of the challenges. Like we are asking people to change their lives based on goals the community sets. Like I didn't choose these, and I don't know, and better ways to do that, and ways to like have those conversations and all that would be great. But it's just, I find that very frustrating, and sometimes I'm like very empathetic with people, and sometimes I'm just like, oh my gosh, I'm really over the hypocrisy of you telling me you care about the environment and you don't want a duplex next door to you because they might chop down a tree. And it's like, that's not environmentalism. Like that's, anyway, so those things are very frustrating to me.
Classic planning problems.
Yeah.
Something that's rewarding, definitely the people, I mean, like we're all mentioning, and I think it's part of why like I am happy to be here in the space, and just like was able to work with a lot of people from my cohort at my last job at GrantWorks, and I really enjoy my coworkers. It's been very strange, the past 2 years, navigating like that kind of relationship and like the meaning at home. But to add something different that I think is really cool is that I feel so connected to my city, to Austin. Particularly now being, working for the city is like kind of working in the implementation phase, right? And before I was working as a consultant and in advocacy, but I was still, and maybe it's just like serendipitous, so I was still like very connected to what was going on. And that's very fulfilling to me. And when I say like connected to what's going on, just as an example, as a consultant, this is in 2014, I'm working on the first urban trails plan for the city of Austin. And with the adoption of that plan, it also created a whole new program. It created the urban trails program. And I had interned with the bike program. And so now, I was interning for these people that I'm now consulting. And then I'm in the advocacy world, and I get to see like some very specific, get to weigh in on some very specific projects. And then this plan gets adopted, and then the 2016 mobility bond passes, and like an explosion of possibilities happen. 2018, I get my job for the city, and it's funny because it's so different in Austin. The amount of work that is happening is crazy. Like I can't keep track, especially at this point. I can't keep track of it because we have teams and developers doing a lot of our work. Like it used to just be the Bikeways team. The majority of the way we get our work done is by following the resurfacing schedule, and then just like redesigning the road. And now that's still a huge component of our work and like prioritization, but we've got bond money, we've got development that we're holding accountable to the bike plan that we passed. We've got partners, it's just all this stuff, new programs like Vision Zero. So being a part of that work, and like, we just had the primaries, and I'm like voting in the primaries, I just feel so connected. And the work is very political. Working for the city is incredibly political. And so I find that to be very exciting. The frustrations, it's like, yeah, I'm like, give me a cocktail and I will tell you that I am I was
Filter.
I don't know which one. I'll give this one example, because this is kind of interesting. I feel like when I got to grad school, I had this experience that apparently a lot of people had that brought us. It was like, I lived in Europe and like, oh my God. And sustainability. And I feel very differently now about biking. And it's because of access, right? And it's more than just access. I mean, an easy way to frame it is that a difficulty I'm having in my field right now is that what, you know, when this is specific to Austin, like, but obviously applicable to like everywhere. We're seeing with gentrification, you know, poor people moving out to areas that will never be walkable and bikeable. And especially when you think about the traditional way of doing bike planning, where it's like you're looking at this network and you're like spider webbing it out, you know, creating a network. You're not creating these little turds on a map. And I'm having a really hard time with the fact that I feel like now I'm building bikeways for rich white people. Like, so case in point, we installed a protected bikeway down south, and I was like not involved with this project, but I speak Spanish and no one else on the team does. And I am like very kind of last minute called in to do some interpretation. And I, you know, read up on the project a little bit, and it's very interesting because you can look at it as like equity, you know. We're serving the Dove Springs area with like some premier bicycle infrastructure. And do y'all know the Dove Springs area? Okay. So it's interesting because it's like a very organized, you know, people are very organized there. And so I get there and I do interpretation and just like keep it short. Basically, like they're like, we don't want this bikeway, and there's like some specific problems with the design. Because right now our projects have gotten a little bit more complicated with bus stops. And so we're working a lot when we do these kind of protected facilities. Oh, I hate using that word. Sorry. It's like we're not building restaurants. We call them facilities, but I'm trying to not use that word. But when we build protected bikeways, now we're doing a lot of like bus stop redesign as we do that. And in this case, it involves pushing the bus stop back a couple blocks. And so here I am doing interpretations, very awkward for me, because I guess, you know, I'm supposed to be like a nonpartisan. Like I took a training at the city of Austin to do interpretation. And I can't believe I passed, because I'm like, this is very difficult. And it's weird because I am a professional. And so I wanted to like, you know, weigh in a little bit. And like, there's one person there from GAVA that I know and I really respect. And my supervisor was kind of saying some wild stuff. And I felt like I was in the middle of this like cultural breakdown, you know. And basically, like, and I do understand both sides of it. They're saying like, no one bikes here. We all have trailers. Everyone's like in landscaping, construction. We have all like these big vehicles, and now we can't make these turns. It's like all this urban planning stuff, right? We're like, we put it in auto simulation, and the radius is good. And they're like, we can't make these turns. Like, we've lived here forever. We have all this equipment. We don't want this. We told y'all 2 years ago when you did public engagement, we want lights. Like, we want better lighting. And, you know, it was like a couple other things. And then, you know, you come in, you're putting this bus stop over here. This one lady was like, I'm gonna be late now, taking my daughter to school. Like, I'm not gonna make it on time because, it's like another 10 minutes to the walk. And the buses come in frequently. And there was a resolve there, but I just found it to be very difficult because, right now I'm in this like kind of burnout phase of like white supremacy culture, and I find that certain skills are not valued, and I'm trying really hard to change that system within transportation, and there's some positive things, and so I want to try to focus on some of the positive things. But like right now, there's a lot of like equity washing kind of happening, and I do think that in order to like truly look at these patterns, to look at displacement, to look at how do we equitably serve people that want to bike somewhere, is incredibly difficult, and it's hard when everyone has their own scope of work. And so that is something that's very frustrating working at the city. There's just a lot of awesome people that work at the city, and then we're all in these different, like, they say they want lighting. Well, we don't do lighting. That's a fact. We don't do it, and I don't know where it is. And like I don't know what their schedule is, and so it's very difficult. And I think, Jesse, you're kind of hitting on this, like with the small wins. Like it's very difficult. I am kind of radical and in the change making kind of scene, I guess, and I'm trying to like measure myself right now because I don't want to burn out, and sometimes it's really hard to understand like where to push, and then like where to be a partner, because I really like partnering with people. So I'm not really trying to go out all the way on a limb. And I do believe in compromise. And so right now I find that it's very difficult to understand like where to push in my field. Like if people are moving to Kyle, if people are moving to all the cities that are not Austin, can we just like form a new kind of like intergoverning thing? Can we like start spending bond money in Pflugerville? Just like stuff like that that's kind of out there, and like that takes a level of patience and energy that is very difficult to sustain. So that's kind of like that's my frustration.
Yeah. I'm gonna go off script a bit, and 'cause these are things that I've been doing a lot as well. And one of my kind of theories of change is that you have to have people on the inside of the agencies that are, have a certain set of ideas around justice and equity or environmentalism or density or whatever, those ideals that we have in planning. But you also need to have a strong group of folks on the outside pushing for that change at the same time. So I wonder if anyone on the panel has good examples to talk about how you've kind of bridged that gap between like your own work on the inside of an agency and trying to engage with folks on the outside that are aligned with the changes that you want to see. This is being live streamed and will be posted. Yeah, so keep that in mind.
I can do one example.
Sure.
So in Bloomington, in the past 2 years, I don't remember like what is time. And we just did a major update to our zoning code, just did a new zoning code. And the city proposed changing that any area that was zoned residential single family would now be allowed triplexes, up to triplexes by right. Because we all read, and and are curious about those things, and are like, oh, I think we should be doing that. And that was, I think, like in a lot of communities, a real public fight. It was things that people say in public meetings where you are like, I am sad that you are saying this, even though we can have different policy preferences. but I am mortified that you're not embarrassed that you're saying it. And so in our community, there's a lot of people who work for the university who are very educated in their fields. And of course, don't acknowledge that planning and housing and all of that is also a field and that people have expertise in that too and can still mess up. It's not like we are infallible. We've messed up a lot of things in the past, like that's happened. But so anyway, so that was a big public thing, and some people formed a local group and they called it Neighbors United, and they organized people to come and speak at the meetings. They organized info sessions and like talked about these policies. And I think along obviously with it getting proposed, but then that group is the reason that passed in Bloomington. And it didn't pass, I'm sorry. We got duplexes conditionally. So like that was the increment that took months, if not a year, I don't remember, and was just like so demanding. I'll just add, like, I think it's really hard. We're just like, I think this idea of what public engagement looks like right now, we're not engagement, it's not engagement, people, the public process of being able to talk at a public meeting, I think it is burdensome. I think things get drawn out in order for things to die, for that, like most of the people who are making comments at these meetings who are anti having a duplex next door are retired, or are academics, do not need to take their kids to daycare in the morning, do not need to wake up to get to a job by 8 a.m. And it's just incredibly frustrating. So, but yes, there was a local group, they formed. I do think it is like to their credit, I would say as staff, we're allowed to participate in anything we want outside of the city and outside of our work hours. And some of us would just try to like check in with that group and ask, like, are there things you need? Is there some data? Do you want to like do a question and answer session with one of us and stuff like that? The same way we would go to a neighborhood. And so I think that was a great example, but most, I'm gonna make it sad, but so like we don't leave it there. We're just like a kind of small place, so it's really hard for that advocacy to exist all the time. And it's really demanding on people's time too. But their advocacy is really, I think, the reason that got approved at all, which was, it's great that it happened, and it's great that next increment has been approved.
Yes.
I can hop in real quick if you don't mind. So in disaster recovery and mitigation, there is a lot of importance placed on equity and vulnerable populations. And so one thing that we work closely with our advocacy organizations and groups across Texas. Our deputy director works closely with their leadership. And then we also have in our grant agreements, a group called the Citizen Advisory Committee, which citizens come together and advise us in our development of action plans and amendments. We also work really closely more recently with the Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity Office, FHEO. So there's a lot of rules and laws tied to these funds that we're spending. So we do have to meet certain requirements and provide reports to them through specific conditions with our grant agreements. And so we're in continual conversation with these organizations, committees, and offices at HUD and locally to make sure that we are being equitable with our funds and making sure that we are addressing issues with socially vulnerable populations. And with regards to social vulnerability, we are working with different universities and professionals who develop social vulnerability indices and other kind of metrics that we can use in our needs assessments and action plans.
So I'm going to ask one more question, and then we'll open up to questions from the audience. For folks on the internet, there's only a couple people in the Zoom room. Just want to say I'm really glad that everybody came out. I think it has something to do with the food, but I'll take that small win. Okay, so the last question I'm going to ask to the group is, what is one thing that you know now that you wish you knew when you graduated from the CRP program? So think about that for a sec. Does anyone want to jump in?
Contracting? I don't know about you all, but contracts and legal are a huge part of the work we do. knowing how to go into a negotiation, knowing how to write a scope of work, knowing how to follow the milestones in a contract, and be sure to know how to manage that contract, and, not fall out of the scope. That's one thing. I don't know if we had coursework on that when I was in school. It might be in your current coursework now. But contracting and legal processing of contracts is one thing that I wish I had known earlier, that I now am learning about still to this day and know a bit more about given my position.
One, this is really simple, but the difference in work culture in different places, specifically like in engineering, as a planner, if you're going to be in the private sector, it's likely, it's possible that you'll work for a firm that's more design oriented, like maybe more of an architecture firm or more of an engineering firm. And I didn't know there's like a big cultural difference. And that was shocking.
I'm gonna say almost what Jess said, really, that I think when I came out of the program, and I don't know when like when we're, I think I was like anti-developers. And I am yeah, we had like 5-year law class. So fun. And I think now I'm like, we live in a capitalist society, and it's just like that is real, and we can be mad that people build housing for money, but everybody sells their home for an appreciated amount too. So it's not like there's this idea that people in a detached single family home are living altruistically. It's just housing is a thing we need, and I think it's people can be great developers or horrible developers. People can be great at or bad at anything they do, just that we need housing. And I'm more like cities can set their rules as to be whatever they want. And so just set your rules to be whatever you want to require and just use it and stop like, I don't know, yeah, that it's just not evil. We need housing, and that's my takeaway.
Yeah, I second that one. Yeah. Make it less complicated.
Well, we're just clear. It can be complicated, but clear, I think.
Well, but it has to evolve, so I think that's the complication piece, right? It's constantly evolving because things, cities are evolving, more people move there, sorts of things, so it's never gonna not be. Yeah. Right. So.
Great.
But
I have one.
I'm gonna second though, legal, I'm in contracts all day, it's because of what I do, but if I could have learned that earlier, I would have probably excelled faster in my job. It's not really, I don't, yes, a class on it would help, but it's something you kind of have to just be immersed in. So if you can get into it, early on in your career, that would absolutely help you. Also, if it is something you're interested going into, if development is, finance absolutely is beneficial to you. Finance, Excel. They both suck, but they are invaluable to you. They're your best friend. I am not good at either, but I have to use it every single day. So I would say that, and then policy, there's one thing I absolutely wish I had done is the dual major with the policy program. I don't know if that even exists anymore, but I do wish that I had doubled down and done that, because there were a few books that I remember doing that, and their careers, I kind of envy what they do as well. So, so anyways, a lot of things there.
Yeah. I wish I had taken a class outside of CRP. It just 2 years is really fast, and I since graduating learn about things that I would want to learn more, kind of like in a classroom setting. Because it's awesome to learn a lot on the job, but you also end up only learning what's relevant to do your job. And I feel like learning for fun, obviously you can do that on your own time, but just depends on how you want to use your free time. But I was gonna say also the weird and helpful information or tips on applying to government jobs. I feel like I didn't know some things until until later, until like I was already established as a professional, and then I was applying for government positions like city and in Cap Metro, or yeah, I guess it was Cap, I applied for a Cap Metro job at one point. It was a similar process, but it's weird. It's like how you write your resume, like absolutely dictates how much you get paid, like speaking very specifically to minimum and preferred qualifications, even though you feel like a robot is what you have to do for government positions. And it will put you in the pay scale, like depending on how you answer that. And it's the same with the interview process. It's like, there's pretty much always going to be a handful of topics that will be discussed. And I find the interview process, and I'm on a lot of interview panels now, I find it to be really intimidating. And I feel like if you are not already looped into how it works, like you're really at a disadvantage for how to advocate for yourself, both in the interviewing process, before that, in like the writing of your resume and whatnot. And then also ultimately when you get the job and like the pay scale you end up being in.
I'm gonna have one career tip to that, which is don't be like, once you get a job offer, I think like, don't be scared to know that in that moment you can talk about it. And like, you can ask for a higher salary. You start with the salary, then you start with benefits and other things of like, well, you pay for me to go to a conference once a year, once every 2 years. Do you pay for AICP certification and that stuff? But like, I think it's a messed up system. You shouldn't have to do that. Salary should be transparent and it shouldn't be like that, but like it currently isn't, or like it just currently is in the shitty way. And I think I feel really uncomfortable in those spaces, but it's like at least government and like other places aren't going to rescind your offer for asking. So like just ask and know like you're in that moment where you can have those conversations and can ask about like, what do promotions look like? Are there options for pay increases here? And I got burned once, get it in writing. It should always be in writing. So like you should have a job offer that is in writing that you get to refer to. That's it. Those are
Yeah, and I'll agree with Beth, like, get in it, you want the interview, you want the in-person interview, and if you ask in person, they will respect you more for that, right? Be advantageous enough to ask in person, and that's the respect you want. And then, yes, get it in writing.
I'm really heartened that the panel mentioned Excel skills, which is something that I try to cover in all my classes. So everyone that was complaining about pivot tables, I know those things are important.
Absolutely necessary.
Thank you so much. I feel so validated. And then Sophia, the point you made about the culture differences between planning and engineering, I think it's really key. My background's in engineering, I'm in planning now.
Okay.
And I've really tried to have more kind of cross fertilization within UT. And I will say that the culture difference that you mentioned extends to academia as well, between planning and engineering, and the kind of different types of knowledge and ways of knowing that are valuable to disciplines. And I'll just leave it at that. Okay, so let's open up some audience questions now.
While we're talking about burnout, as someone who went straight from undergrad to grad school, I get to know lots of feeling burnout. I was wondering how you go about feeling with that.
Oh, we were what? Sorry, I didn't hear. Feeling about
Burnout.
oh, burnout.
And how we go out like that.
I'm open to suggestions.
I'll go first, because I am not burnt out anymore, so let me. So I worked 2 years, did undergrad, worked 2 years, did CRP, which was 2 years, and then I worked for 8 years. And then took a year off, did consulting, and now I have a new job, right? But I was incredibly burnt out at my previous job and felt very frustrated, had lost my lust for what I did, all those sorts of things. And so much so that I couldn't figure out, I knew I needed to find something new, but I couldn't figure out what I needed to find. It's like you look at job, like you're talking about looking at job applications and like, do I really want this job? It's like, I have no clue if I want this job,
Yeah.
because I've lost it, right? And you hate that you feel that way. But sometimes it's okay to let yourself take a break, and that is, I think, the hardest thing to reconcile with, getting to that space of allowing yourself to have that break. So, but I think the pandemic for me allowed me to take that break, and then just taking the break, working for myself, figuring out that I could work for myself and I was valued in a space where I was my own boss. That gave me the validation to realize I can do my own thing, and then then the work starts coming to you and people want you. So it just, I think things shift like they should, when you start to turn the tables on yourself.
Things I'm working on, I feel burnt out, some advantages are that I work for local government. We really we have timesheets and we log 40 hours a week. And I would say, of course, the pandemic has been hard. I am learning that I do better going into the office than working from home. And I am trying to remind myself of that, even though it's easier to work from home for me because it's just there. But that is I do a lot better with compartmentalizing those aspects of my life. I am trying to flex my schedule less than I have. I am not a morning person, but that can just creep too much. And I've been reading about flexible schedules can lead to people working a lot more. Women do more household labor when they work from home more, things like that. So I can go to the office. I'm trying to keep these hours at a minimum. We've talked about, I say a thing to myself that I'm I am trying to cultivate an identity beyond my profession. Right now, I've only gotten to saying it. We don't know. I don't know what is next with it. I organized an alumni happy hour to deal with being burnt out, to be what are people doing? What is your job like? But I would say I am happy that I work in a place where we do only work 40 hours a week. I am not interested in working more hours a week than that. I am very interested in getting a job where we're prorated to work 32 hours a week, but I haven't found that yet. And also I got a dog. I think it's helpful. Right now I take my dog to work on Fridays. Everybody loves it. And I just mainly haven't gotten in trouble yet. Because people are is this allowed? And I'm I don't know. People come visit my dog in the office on Fridays. I feel other people get happy. They don't like dogs, they don't have to come visit him. And then reading books that are not about planning, which is really hard because every book I want to read is about planning, and then I can't read that before bed, so then I never finish them. And so then doing things that are unrelated to planning. Those are some of my hot takes.
I feel I would recommend taking a year off before work, whatever that means, whatever taking a year off would mean for you. And but it's really easy to recommend that. I don't know how you're feeling, but I know how I feel in my career is that I was able to I feel traveling, and specifically international travel, and I have family and a lot of family in South America and Spain. And so I grew up and my dad's a professor, and they took sabbaticals around, and I feel international travel felt so available to me. This is about to get sad. But I started working, and that was less than 10 years ago. But I started in 2013, my career, and I haven't been able to take a lot of time off and go live somewhere else and actually learn another language or improve my own language skills. And I'm trying to figure that out, honestly. So like very open to suggestions, but I realize that that's like, I could actually just quit my job and like go travel around for a year and like figure that out and come back and get a new job. Like, I know that I can do that, and I have, you know, friends and colleagues that have done that. So it's like, I realize it's like easier for me to tell you that because I think about when I was a student and I didn't go straight from undergrad to grad school. I like floated around for 2 years, and so then I think that made me very excited about grad school and then starting like a real, you know, path to a career. And like a career is a pretty fun thing to have. Like, you just, at this point for me, like I've learned so much and I've made so many connections with people that I really respect, that really respect me. And like, we are all, you know, maybe ranging in the mid-level, I guess, like as far as profession goes. And so it's an exciting place to be. It's really hard to pull away from. And I think with my burnout around like racial equity work and all that, I'm trying to figure out how to be kind of measured with that because I really care about it and I don't want to step away from it. But I don't want to like live at the stress that I've been living at. So that is almost like I need to do a little equation, but I'm gonna like figure that out and like not walk away. And then with work in general, honestly, like I'm curious what y'all have been going through because I want to try to like go, like my partner is a teacher and has the summers off. And I was like, okay, you need to learn Spanish. Let's go to like Mexico for the summer. And the pandemic has like really uninspired me to try to make that work. And it's just such a bummer thing to say because we're all going through it. And I don't know what the solution is there, but like, I feel like in my shoes, figuring out how to do something like that, like how to go somewhere for a month is really hard because no one is going to say yes at first. You know, like my supervisor is not going to say yes. And it's because her supervisor is going to be like, absolutely not. But I know I can do it. I mean, like, it's just weird. It's like, everyone's like, you can't do that. But like, there's some higher ups at the city that don't live in Austin. Okay.
Oh.
We all know. It's like, you just have to figure out how to make it work. Like whether it's like a major power flex or, you know, whatever, like being very organized. That's what I think I need to do. I think I need to be very organized about having a specific trip with like specific dates in mind and then approach my supervisor about it. And then like make that work. And I am not like that. So that's my personal struggle.
Do you not feel like the pandemic and just like transition to remote work has made that more possible?
It
Not
is
less?
so funny. This is like very Parks and Rec vibe. But they're like, you cannot work remotely. And they even tried to pull out, like, this is like a legit email from like the head person at the city of Austin. They even tried to pull out like tax reasons.
Ours says we have to work from within the state. But like, I am oddly kind
Remember,
of
it's being
anti.
recorded.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm not working, I'm on vacation. I
I mean,
I
this is
don't
like a
mind
frustrating
it.
thing for a lot of people, you know, I think like, I don't know who sent that email out, but like, they might not have wanted to send it out either, you know?
Yeah. I mean, it's the same at UC, like, we're also not so.
Yeah.
But like, I think it's interesting because I am more like, when I am away, I want to be away. So like I have, before they made that rule, gone on trips where I worked part of the time and then took off other parts of the time. And what I found was like, it didn't help my brain, that I was like, oh, I'm like trying to make working here work, and that it seems like I'm very all or nothing.
Well, I'm not talking about working in
Oh.
Mexico.
You know, they offer a month and they won't do it.
Okay. I am just saying, I want to go to Mexico.
Yeah, you just want to like that. Yeah, yeah.
But I don't know what that looks like, 'cause I've never experienced like truly working remotely, and I imagine that would have some limitations, but but also be like kind of tempting. It's hard to pull away from work. You know, there's always stuff ongoing. So like ideally, I would have some flexibility, and that's what's been very hard for me to navigate in my professional life. Is like I feel like in academia, in my experience in academia as a student, it's like you know the deadlines and you get your work done, and we're not asking you how long you spent to accomplish this task or where you were when you did it, and or what you're wearing, you know. And I found that actually just very natural. I never thought about it until being in a professional setting where all of those things are very regulated, you know. And I'm a very good worker. Like I know I produce good work and I work hard and well, and like I really buck at that regulation around what I'm wearing, where I am, what time I work, and I don't know what to say. That's a really frustrating reality, you know. I think in our field is just maybe a bit more traditional than, well, I don't know than what, but you know, I think of friends that are in tech that have that just don't deal with that kind of stuff. But we very much do. I dealt with it in all three jobs, you know. So like the private sector isn't like cool and like flexible like everyone. So when I was in grad school, that was the impression I had. I was like, you just get a private sector job and you do like you get paid more and you have more flexibility. And like that's not true, you know. It's like this is a big cultural thing. Obviously much bigger beyond our field, but that professionalism. So I don't know. I'm curious to see how the pandemic will change it, but I think that's going to be like a conversation over the next several years.
Great. Yeah, question.
Could you, because we all know, like, when you're talking to community leaders, don't use planner words or use, you know, acronyms and things. But how do you go through the process of kind of compromising with other professionals? Like you kind of talked about this in the beginning about how like engineers and culture and like they need to be dealt with in a certain way. So could you kind of talk through your process of how you talk to people, other professionals, and like deal with that, like either in a good way or bad way?
Like if you're trying to get a project through, or you're trying to just talk to general, would this be like professionals or general public, like
No,
residents?
this is for professionals. Like like you're at the table with an engineer and an architect,
Okay.
and you're trying to explain like this is the way we have to do it because X, Y, Z. How do you deal with them? Because like they can be sorry.
Yeah.
So, like, you know, they're very confident and they have a professional background.
Yeah.
So you know.
I'll say first, in my experience, people default to what an engineer says.
Yeah.
So I think that is definitely gendered and a long history of like, which I don't like the terms hard skills and soft skills. I'm very offended by them, but so I think the deference usually goes to an engineer. And I mostly work, I work directly with engineers. We do not have architects employed at the city. So my example would be like a street redesign project that we're doing in Bloomington, and maybe we've consulted for design or it's in-house, and I see things on it and I'm like, oof, I don't think that's how it should be. I'll just, first I try to learn to like gently push back, because when, it depends on who you're working with and it depends on people's styles, but sometimes asking questions about it and getting people to think through it is more effective, that they will agree with that. Sometimes it is more just like pushing and saying like, hey, I don't think that's in line with our goals. And if we are making these decisions between two things here, it might be either like, this is what our code says. I feel like this is a mundane one, but like we have it all the time about like tree plots and sidewalk widths. And it's like, I work a lot to be like, we're not starting from the car lanes and these things are add-on space, and if they can't fit, then they get reduced. We have to look at the entirety of the public right of way and say, like, we need to stop assuming what has a right to be here. People have heard me say this a lot, so that comes up a lot in meetings, that can we narrow the lanes? Can we get rid of a lane? We don't have a plan that says how many car lanes should be here. We have a plan that says the sidewalk should be 7 feet, and the tree plot should be 5 feet. If it's not that, why are we not following our own code? So I don't know, I just, mostly just push back. I have great working relationships, in my opinion, who knows? With the engineers I work with, one of them, he's Coworkers, City of Austin, he is amazing, and we're friends, and, I think it's become a thing too, where I will say, sometimes people have said, oh, Beth wants, and I'm like, false. I am expressing what our adopted plans say. So like, this is not about my preference and what I want on the street. This is about our community adopted plan. And that helps sometimes. And I'm working to make it like an institutionalized process of why it's crazy to me that like private development is all through, that we regulate private development through a very detailed zoning code and subdivision code, and with public space, we're like, well, we'll try to follow our plans, but sometimes there are good reasons we can't, and we don't need to present on those reasons, or we, like, it just makes the default the status quo. And like, I'm working on us making the default following our transportation plan, so that we have to shift the conversation as to why we're not delivering on that, instead of why we are asking people to change. It's like, we've decided as a community that we want these streets to be different. So like, why aren't we delivering on that? And I think like reminding like that those things have happened. I don't know, I really went way over with that question. Does that help? Okay.
I think for me, because I'm always talking to, it might be a planner, you know, that's been there for 30 years, and they may not have the same goals as what I'm trying to accomplish with this. We're creating a very new type of product that no city has seen before. I mean, a lot of the cities that we're in has not seen before, so they're, you know, scrambling to create a new wording in their code. So sometimes it's just understanding, okay, to Beth's point, what is the city's goals in their land development code? What are our goals? My business plan's goals, this project, and trying to bridge that gap when you're having a conversation, right, at the table with the plan up on screen, to have a meaningful conversation, get everyone to the same goal, which is to get the project, for me, on approval, right? And not talk about money, because they hate that, you know, anytime you bring up money, if I try to say, oh, well, you know, these trees, earlier in my career, I would say, well, you want me to put all these trees in, and you're making me put them in this narrow space, and I know, you know, they're all gonna die, and so that's gonna cost a ton of money, and why do you want me to lose all this money? Like, this is ridiculous. Well, that doesn't make any sense to them, you know, they don't care. They don't care how much money
There's like a-
I lose, like, that's how they think about it. So I have to change the conversation and say, you want all these trees, I want all these trees for the betterment of the city, for the betterment of the residents, for the betterment of the larger community. And that is a win for everyone. And of course, I want these trees to survive. So absolutely, like, let's look at the width of the sidewalk that I have to put in. And let's shift things around, because the growth rate of this tree, it's not gonna survive, right? Well, they don't know that, because the planner, the LA, the planner, and the engineer that designs everything, the criteria, they're not talking to each other half the time. And that is the number one frustration that I face most of the time when we're dealing with plan approvals, is that the cities, a lot of times, they're either too small and not sophisticated enough to deal with what's going on, or they're too big, like Austin has become, no offense, and they just can't keep up, right, with everything. So it's difficult. So you just have to have those, you have to figure out how to structure the conversation where they understand what the common goal is, you know, why it's a win for them, right? The best thing you can do at the end of the day, or in my, or what I do, is get someone in the house. I want to create a home for someone. It doesn't matter what kind of home it is. I want to move someone in their house, but I want to park for, you know, the neighboring community. That's the goal for me. And it should be a goal for the city, right? So.
Branding is really important, and I feel like sometimes I'll spend a lot of time composing an email because I really want to think about framing that is productive.
Mhm.
And it was only recent that I felt like, you know what, that is good. That is okay to spend a lot of time writing an email that, or, you know, writing an email, essentially like spending a lot of time framing an approach. And it's just interesting, like small things like that like maybe don't fit into typical work culture, I would say. That I'm starting to feel more confident about doing or about valuing. And like the comment of like hard skill, soft skill, like really it's a very powerful thing for your own self to reframe or to, you know, reframe certain things, just as it is like when you're working with other people. And I think that would be my main advice, is just like feel confident in taking that time to approach it in a productive way.
There's like, it is strategic, like you're thinking strategically. And that I think if you, I'm trying to still work on this with the burnout, but that I'm sometimes like, I am the most committed to like moving toward our community goals. And so it isn't about me, but it is about like, what is the best way for me to respond to this in order to like help move that increment? Not like, well, first I sounded pretty aggressive, but like rarely am I aggressive in a meeting because it won't help move you forward. It is more like, oh, you know, are we thinking about this? But yeah, I think the way you described thinking about how you're framing and thinking about that is just strategic thinking. And I think we all do it a lot and don't always think about it or name it really.
Yeah.
Great. So we're almost at time, but I want to give the panelists one last kind of rapid fire question. So maybe like 30 seconds each. Just final parting words of wisdom for CRP students and soon to be graduates. Can we start?
Sure.
Go down.
Yes, so 30 seconds. Great field of study you all are in. It's fantastic. It really is. There's a lot of opportunities out there, public, private, as mentioned before, nonprofit. A lot of good things can come of this degree. So you're doing great work. Keep up the good work. KUTGW is the acronym used for that. And yeah, it's fun. It's fun out there. You'll get. Don't worry about the burnout. I mean, your tolerance will grow as you and take time off and enjoy doing your hobbies. And don't define yourself by the work you're doing. But because there are going to be some failures in work, and that can be hurtful if you define yourself through. So, thank you.
I would say if you are like seeking more advice and any kind of mentorship, I feel like I have to make a plug because I'm on the board of AntiDevelopers, and they have a really cool mentorship program. And I mentored someone who was actually at Berkeley finishing her CRP degree, and it was a really fun and like very helpful exchange for both of us. And now she works for Smart Growth America, and I think I never did anything like that when I was in school, and it would have been just really helpful. So I'm recommending the APDP mentorship
Can you tell folks about the acronym?
Oh, yeah, Association of Bicycle and Pedestrian, I get it backwards, Association of Pedestrian and Bicycle Professionals.
My department is going to be hiring soon. If anybody wants to come to Bloomington, Indiana, I know we're in Austin, so neat. I really enjoy working at the scale I work at. That my community is like 23 square miles. It's just knowable. I understand I don't know everybody's life experience and all the things that are happening in that space, but like I enjoy that scale. So my advice is like think about that, or like don't like you all can do such great things for a lot of small towns too, and that would be really cool. I have a pet peeve of people having multi-page resumes. And I just think because people like me exist, you should always only have a one-page resume. Don't give me a two-page resume. You can have references on a different page, but none of your resume on it. And like a cover letter tells me how good you are at writing. That I'm forgiving, but I think what I want in people is people who are concise and clear writers, because that saves so much time for me to not have a heavy hand in editing. So, and then I'm always like, the purpose of your resume and cover letter is to get an interview. It is not your entire professional history. I'm always like, just make sure you're clear enough to like get to an interview. That's my advice. And I'm happy to talk more tonight.
I would say, do things that make you uncomfortable. So like say yes to things, obviously say yes to things that you never would say. Do fun things that are related to work, your profession, fun things outside of work so that you can network. You never know when you're going to make some kind of connection that leads to the next thing, right? I said no way too often and it kept me, in something I didn't like. But always say yes, and then you'll know when it's time to say no, right? I think that's really.
Awesome. Thanks so much. All right, let's give the panel a round of applause.
Yes.